Hello and welcome to Hello Yellow. For those of you who have been watching us, you'll know that this is a program that is not like anything else on television at the moment. Or if you're listening to us, it's not like anything else you may have been hearing within Australia. Because here we talk about all things from authors to woo-woos to shamans to crystal dreaming to star children. So if you were fortunate enough to listen in last week, we had the wonderful guest Freya talking to us about what she does in this world and where she's been and where she's coming from, coming to, going to. And today we are delighted to have her back to talk about star children, beyond that, crystal dreaming, and how that can impact your life so that you can actually find your life's purpose. Believe me? Well, stay tuned. Welcome, Freya, back to the program.
Great to be here.
So, Freya, just picking up from last week, you were kind enough to talk us through how to identify whether or not your child is a star child. We talked a little bit about the connection of autism and why that's so prevalent in today's society. Today I wouldn't mind still touching on those sorts of things, but also then bringing back to how you understood your greater gifts, the six senses, and then some of the things that you've been through to bring you to this point today. So, very loaded question.
Okay, big question, right.
But I'm wanting people to understand that you don't get to this point by just knowing, you know. You've been through a fair bit.
A lot.
In order to be a wonderful healer yourself. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your life and some of those hallmark moments that have helped you alchemize trauma so that other people might be able to in turn relate to you. And
as I said on the last program, there was a point where I was in my early teens, I was asking the chaplain if he could answer some questions, and he couldn't answer those effectively for me. So at that point, I asked him, I said, I think the question was like, it's okay to kill people in the name of God, but if you kill people in any other way, then it's not okay. And he's like, yes, that's fine. I was like, but didn't God say, don't take a life, It's like, sort of eyes crossed and no real answer. And I was like, and what about this? And I asked a few other questions and he couldn't come up with it. And I said, okay. And I said, and are you telling me that if I renounce this because I can't get past this, then I will burn in hell forever? And he said, yes. And I was like, okay, well, that's not divine being that I believe in. So I don't believe in that level of judgment and cruelty. So, so I renounce. And then I expanded quickly.
And how old were you then?
I was 13.
Oh God, right, okay.
Yeah, I know. So this is what I mean about star children. They're like, what's going on here? Because you're grappling to remember and map your way out of what's like a labyrinth, really. Yeah. So we've all seen the movie The Labyrinth, hopefully with David Bowie, because it's awesome.
I haven't, but I will. I'll put it on my to-do list.
Your kids will love it. So that was one thing. And then the next thing that backed that up quickly was I elected to do Aboriginal studies over social studies, and that was the first opportunity to do that in Western Australia. And within 40 minutes, my paradigm was so absolutely blown. It was the total opposite of everything I'd been told, and so I lost faith in school. I lost faith in school, the government, everything. When I went home and talked to my parents and said, this is what happened, then they said, no, that's not what happened. And I realised how indoctrinated everyone was. And then I became very scared, really scared at that point.
What to believe and what to do and how to be.
And of what the world really was.
Right.
Yeah, it was like a total paradigm shock, How does this fit? So my time at school lasted some time after that, but I was progressively more and more unhappy because I couldn't see the point in all of this, and I didn't know if what I was being told in all of these other classes was really truth. So I was questioning absolutely everything at that point.
Which is okay to question.
Yeah, and my family life wasn't exactly a bowl of roses either, so I was getting challenged in that direction.
In what sense was it not great?
Oh, you know, my parents were very different people, and they weren't expressive of love in the way that I would know that, you know, as, you know, loving kindness and, you know, real energetic connection. Because remember, I can see their auras and everything, and it's more like retracted and not, there isn't love flowing from heart to heart. There's this obligation and duty and we'll stay together for the children kind of consciousness going on. And that was, you know, that repelled me as well.
But that's not uncommon. Like honestly, Freya,
I'm aware of that.
It's not uncommon. So
I know, but this is the world we've created for ourselves, you know, because there's no reason that we can't transform our conflicts into harmony or honour and respect differences and then come to a place of opening the heart. But it takes education.
And courage.
And courage, that's right. And the structure of life is that we're kept very, very busy, so there's not time allowed or prioritised for doing those things. And it actually takes courage to be able to step away from all of the systems that we have as much as possible to create that space in order to transform. Because you have to unearth what's there and get rid of the old beliefs, thoughts and programming that isn't serving you, that's actually harming you, in order to be able to thrive in life.
And look, in the last program you talked about blame. And I think, you know, because there's so much I want to talk to you about, I think that adults with children and even in any relationship,
absolutely,
there's this blame game that goes on. And in my view, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the time it's just you've got to sit, pause and say, okay, how can I do things differently and open that heart center up? And, you know, it's almost like you take the layers off, be vulnerable to allow that heart to speak to that heart, because this constant sort of anarchy, it's your fault, you're to blame, you're not doing this for me,
It's a power struggle.
Correct.
Grab the end of the rope and you're young. And so it's not a rope you're holding, it's a meridian and it's energy. You're fighting for the energy and your ego is fighting to be right.
Yes.
Because if you're not right, then you're wrong. And in the schooling system that I was brought up in, I was taught that if I wasn't right and the best at everything, I was wrong and a failure. Right?
Yeah.
And I think we all go through that. So then it is expanded out into our relationships and so on, because that's what we're indoctrinated with. But what I want to get back to there is that when it comes to these situations, we're talking about power struggle. So the poles of that are nag.
Yes.
And so what do you do? What do? You go, talk to the hand because the face ain't listening. You know, it's that kind of thing. So we become aloof. We go out, become
you become
phones
disconnected.
off. No, it's not, you know.
Yeah, and you know, and the other thing is with relationships too. You either, if you don't want to do the work, so you don't want to do the work, the learnings, so you leave
That's
the
right.
relationship because
That's
it's
right.
the easy, and then you've just got yourself.
Yeah.
Which is very common too.
But you are the problem in your own portion of it, which is your universe, and you're going to take that to the next relationship unless you change. And the other power struggle that we go through is victim and perpetrator. And, you know, we can bounce back and forward from those things, particularly when energy's really going crazy. But the cycle of relationship is really, you know, when we get into a relationship, we're in the honeymoon phase, everything's fabulous, we just want to be together forever.
Love bomb.
Just want to stay there,
Yeah.
in, you know, in the
Love
love
long
bubble.
time.
Yeah, that's it. So that's going on. And then all of a sudden it's like the rose-coloured glasses start thing, and then you're like, hang on a second. Where's this? You're not showing me only the best part of yourself now. Nobody said anything to me about this crunchy bit in the fine print, you know, and it's like, well, I don't believe that, or I don't agree with that, and we start to see differences. You're messy, you leave the towels on the floor after you've had a shower, and I don't want to have to clean up after you all of the time. Yeah. But instead of having an empowered conversation, then it ends up in conflict.
So what does the empowered conversation look like, though?
Well, you know, it takes a lot of practice and courage to do these things. Really, people need to go and undergo empowerment training. There are courses for this, which, you know, which start that process. But the basic sort of empowerment conversation would be, darling, I notice that, you know, every day you leave the towels on the floor in the bathroom, and I imagine that that's because you're so busy and in a hurry to get out to work. But I feel upset when I come in because I'm in a hurry to do stuff too, and then the bathroom is not clean and beautiful like I left it yesterday, and then I have to clean up all your stuff, and then I have to get myself ready, and then I have to clean up again. And so I feel upset when that happens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm wondering if you could please just chuck the bath mat up and hang your towel up. I'd be so grateful.
Yeah, mine would
That's
go
it.
along the lines of, for God's sake, pick your goddamn towel up, for God's sake.
And, you know, and that's it. And that's because that's how we have been taught that humans interact, and we see it on movies, and not this TV show, but TV shows everywhere, you know. And we get it in the schoolyard. Bullying is getting more and more worse than it's ever been.
And why is that?
It is because when frequency shifts, the more light you bring in, the more dark we'll meet it, because we have polarity. So it's going to express, but our job is, as individuals, is to remember divine law and to come back into harmony with that. It's about giving, you know, forgiving and being of service, you know, and working on our frequency so that, you know, understanding that when we are afraid, that is what's underpinning anger. And we get angry when our boundaries are crossed. And why is our boundary crossed? Because we haven't asserted it. We didn't even have one. We didn't know we needed to have one.
No, we didn't know.
But who taught us that? Did we
No.
ever get taught that by our parents or school? No, I'm not blaming them either. I'm saying this is the situation that we face. So at some point we have to go, okay, this is crazy, but if it's to be, it's up to me. So I have to make the changes in myself. I can't make you or my husband or my child change. I have to make the changes in me, in how I approach things and how I set boundaries and my foresight and all of those things.
Yeah, and apart from that beautiful empowerment sort of conversation that we'd all ideally like to have, I think it's really...
Take practice. It really does take practice.
But it is just about almost, I feel, taking your armoury off, and really the children, say if it's between child or, you know, partner or what have you, it's actually letting them know that the energy is not anger about them. It's almost like, help me help you, because so I think, you know, to fast forward through that empowerment, you know, I guess skill set, it's really just like, you know, come on guys.
But also one of the key things is, and funnily enough, I just had this conversation very recently, it's not only, like if you get angry with your child or in front of your child, then if they're at an age where they're old enough to understand, and if you actually really think back, you were pretty young when you were old enough to understand what was going on. I know for me it was 6 months on. That was it. I was aware. So when a parent makes a mistake, rather than, you know, beating themselves up about it or pretending like it never happened or justifying it to themselves, they can say, gosh, I'm so sorry, you know, yeah, you know, mummy or daddy has, you know, didn't handle that well, and I know that I've got challenges with anger, and I'm doing my best to work that out, and everything I said, it's not, you know, it's not true. You are perfect and beautiful. Play. Be joyful. Just be kind, and try to consider that I'm doing my best to look after you while you're screaming the house down. Right? You know, like actually make it real for them,
Yeah.
so that they can then start to understand more of the dynamics and have more consideration, or whatever the thing is that you're seeing that they're lacking in that moment, and that's triggering. It's about, you know, like talking that out, but it's owning our stuff first. We have to own it.
And I agree wholeheartedly,
Yeah.
and I've used those techniques myself, and it actually does work. Because at the end of the day, we're humans too, and the kids have to understand that we don't have all the answers. But I want to come back to something that we were talking about off camera, because obviously you being such an evolved being and soul.
Doing my best.
And my view is you don't get to that point, and you convince me otherwise, unless it came from another lifetime or what have you, that, you know, you've been through your own struggles too.
So after all of those wild, crazy paradigm shifts that I went through at a young age, then I was like, well, you know, I just can't focus anymore. I couldn't focus on the schoolwork. And I was a straight A student, so I was not shirking in my schoolwork, nor was I unintelligent. It was just that I couldn't get with it anymore. So I extricated myself from that situation, and as time went past, I got into a relationship, and I was still fairly young. Of course, don't by any means think that I'm not thinking that I was a teenager and I knew everything, right? There's all of that and the hormones and everything going on as well. So I'm completely aware and own all of that. It's just that, you know, I ended up in a relationship which was very, very, very difficult. Right. It was very violent, and, you know, it was probably up there with one of the most violent and abusive relationships that you could find yourself in. And the entire time that I was in it, the only reason I remained in that relationship was because that person had threatened to take my life and take the life of my parents. So, and you know, really, I'm not going to go into the graphics of it, but it was really, I was not prepared to leave that relationship and risk. It would have been bad enough my life, but I wasn't at that time prepared to risk my parents' lives, you know, because I loved them.
Of course.
Even if they irritated me at times, you know, I love them and always will. And so that went on for 4 years.
That's a long time.
A long time, yeah. If you can just wrap your head around emotional, mental, sexual, and physical abuse on a daily basis, that's what it was. And one day, I'd been through a series of experiences. I actually had a friend during that time whose name was Karma, and I was like, what is the universe telling me here? But I was in such a self-loathing, self-judging frequency because I felt like I didn't fit or belong in the world, and that there was something intrinsically wrong with me. I was prepared to accept that rather than love myself, because I hadn't been taught to love myself. Or, and the whole reflection of the world was like, well, you're not enough, so, you know.
But, you know, respectfully, a lot of people will be in those situations, have been, will be, and even you, as such an evolved human, you still manage to find yourself in that space for
a reason, yeah, for multiple reasons. I mean, the divine doesn't work in, it's like, you know, get the hammer, bang the nail in, it's for that one thing. It's any situation we're in, we're meant to be learning multiple things. So, you know, it's a law of economy is one of the laws, the divine laws that work. So in my case, I was trying to work out what to do next, you know. I wasn't allowed to wear a skirt, couldn't have a job, couldn't drive a car, none of it.
Complete
you know, it was
control.
Complete control. So I eventually got forced to get a job by the government through the unemployment benefit program. I was so happy. And because I couldn't have a car, I cycled to and from home and work. And one day a car hit me on my bike I was just about home, and this car hit me. I went straight over, skinned my face, my knees, my elbows, had a helmet on and all, but still skinned myself. And over the handlebars, I pushed myself up, saw this car ahead of me. They saw me move and they took off. At which point I was like, really? I was like, is this it? Is this really what life is about? You know, because this is nuts. Then I went, and I was constantly questioning, why am I in this situation, in this relationship? Why isn't all my school friends and all of these other people I met, why are they not in a situation like this? What is going on with me? So anyway, I went home that day, and he was very concerned about me for all of about 5 minutes.
That was generous.
It was. And then he started the usual thing, at which point I thought, that's it, I'm done. And I would find myself in a situation where it was like, if I didn't behave in the exact right way, the whole scenario would get worse. So it was like, if I fought back, it would be worse. If I played the victim, it would be worse. It was like, you'd be like, so
Impossible.
It was impossible. Yeah. But this day I, changed my behaviour because I made a decision. I was like, I will die getting out of this relationship if that's what it takes, because I'm not prepared to live like this anymore. I suddenly developed more self-love because I'd been doing so much personal inquiry as to what's going on. And so I changed my behaviour, which really pissed him off, and it hurt, the outcome of that. But the result was drastic enough for him not to be able to hide what he was doing anymore. It became very, very visible. And it was at that point that I could then set a boundary and say, that's it, we're done, you will never put a finger on me again. I'm leaving you. And then it was the threats to kill himself and all of that stuff. And I was like, okay, well, you go ahead because, this is what's happening. And I'm just going to say, it is the old story. He was traumatised himself enormously, so it was handed down. But I had been in this situation long enough to know what I had worked it out. I was like, okay, this is coming from this, and this. And he's now got this off emotion in him and these negative energies and things attached to him which are triggering this behaviour, right? Because I could see everything, even though that was like dulled down quite a lot because I was, like not in a very healthy vibration at that point. Yeah.
So you were able to sort of almost get an independent view, you disconnect and be able to see it in a different, have a different perspective, which gave you probably the courage to then move forward and move away from it.
And then yes, that's right. So ultimately, he was like, please stay. And I was like, no, I'm I said, okay, well, the stupid thing is, like, I did actually love this person. And that is, well, it's not stupid because love is love. And at the highest level of truth, this person and I had a soul contract to learn about things, And so that's where that love of the abuser really comes from. And I was able to say to him, look, here's the lay of the land. And his face was like in shock. It was like he didn't know himself. He couldn't see himself or understand what his behaviour was connected to. So when I named that for him, he was like, okay. And I was like, well, if we get counselling, we can move forward. He goes, well, only if we do it together. And I'm like, well, and only if you stay here and live with me. And I said, well, I don't trust you. I can't trust you. Haven't ever been able to trust you.
There's a lot of women and men in these situations
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah, it goes both directions of experience. Yeah, so I was able to say, look, I will go and get counselling, you go and get counselling, and we can do it together. And that's how we can move forward, but I'm not living with you.
And so what happened then?
He said, no, only if you do this. He said, it's all or nothing.
Okay.
And I was like, well, you got nothing. So I left. Then I had to leave my phone numbers out of phone books and all that stuff. He stalked me for 7 years. Then my brother committed suicide because he, again, was, a sick star child, and he was also vaccine damaged. So he developed severe illnesses after his vaccines at a young age, which attacked his immune system drastically. And so we lived with a whole lot of, things. I won't go down that road today, but that's one of the other things. And then my father, so it was my father who died, and then 10 months later my brother took his own life. So we had a lot of loss in a very short time, so drastic grief. And without my father there, my brother's, life became very short. Yeah.
So you've been through so much.
Yeah.
But you are a healer now.
Yeah.
And people come to you, and I love that you are so open, because in order for people to be able to connect with you and understand and have faith in your wonderful gifts and ability is because you can understand that they've vibrated or been through so much trauma similar to you. But there is hope, because tell us.
Well, I found wonderful teachers, I found wonderful teachers, and I engaged in study. I didn't do 50 million things at once. I did one thing at a time, and I did it deeply.
Which was?
Well, I started with Ignite Your Spirit, and I learned to facilitate that modality, which is spiritual healing, and also teach the path of ease and grace, and that's through Shanti Mission. So that was really interesting, but it was in that place that I met Raymond Shakan, who are the creators of Crystal Dreaming, because my teacher in Shanti Mission had remembered that she was a guru through a crystal dreaming session.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was pretty wild. And really, and how I got there was, I had asked the question, I was like, I need to know about chakras in depth, right? And I had been through my awakening by that point. So if I just circle back for a sec, the pressure of not liking life on earth and all of those sorts of things became so great that I just searched deeply, deeply inside, and one day it happened. I had this Kundalini awakening, or some people would call it revelations, or some people would call it, a great awakening. There's so many different names for the same experience, but effectively what it is when the sleeping repository of energy at the base of the spine ascends the spinal cord, which is actually a major meridian, and connects with the pineal gland inside the brain. And that's when that's when I remembered the truth of who I am. I remembered my magnificence. I remembered why I came to Earth.
What a beautiful,
I met my team who loved me unconditionally, and we've been working together ever since. I remembered my life blueprint, and people often say, like, oh, enlightenment, that's what I want. I'm like, well...
Yeah, it's not quite like that.
That's just the beginning. Yeah. Then the work really starts,
And so, I can't tell you how much my heart's filled by listening to you. And I think simplistically what you've explained is that everything is within you. Even those people who are listening or watching and like, well, I can relate to X, Y, and Z, or whatever difficulty that's going on within themselves. I guess the summation, without all of the beautiful languages and understandings and experiences you've had, is just to sit in that space quietly. Sit as quietly as you can, because you do have all of the answers, but you also need help sometimes. And someone like you in your field of work, I think, can be so very helpful to help people shift and learn and grow. And for all of us, we love learning about ourselves, don't we?
Yeah, well, it's fun. And we're so multi-dimensional. There's a lot of cool stuff to learn, to remember.
And, we're all on that journey. I'm on that journey, and I'm loving understanding different parts of my personality, my behaviours, and, things that have happened for me, not to me.
Yeah.
And so, you work on a magazine, you've got a podcast, you've got a Facebook page, and I would seriously invite anyone who's touched this program is to really reach out to you, because there are so many. We just didn't get through it all,
So if I put that all into a nutshell, my purpose is to reconnect you with your purpose. That's my job, and my team have taken me through a process of learning numerous modalities deeply, because we are a multi-dimensional being, and a hammer will not build a house, right? Or renovate one, as this case may be. And on top of that, we require to understand how to drive this multidimensional ship that we're in. And so there are different courses that you can take to explore your clairs, to attune to your higher guidance, to learn the anatomy of your divinity, and numerous other things. And then there are incredible sacred journeys that we take, my partner and I, my beautiful darling man, who we take people all around the world to sacred sites so that they can be there, connect with it, and remember where they've been, where they've come from, and really, you know, become part of the transformation team of life on Earth.
Thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you
Freya.
for having me.
I've loved talking to you. And please, anyone watching or listening, please reach out to the details below, because why not live your best life? Thanks for joining us.